The guy I'd been hooking up with digitally turned out to be my crotchety boss. Hugs. I had a great time today, Onyx. You always deliver. Perhaps we can meet up sometime. Panting, I looked forward at Mystic, the hot, effeminate guy I'd been hooking up with in the Second Life. Similar to the one I'd been playing for the last year. The idea of the meeting would be fun, but how could I trust Mystic? Sure, we'd been having e-hookups for the last year here. We talked a little bit about our personal lives, though. Most of the time we got straight to the foreplay and bypassed everything else. I stared at the screen, contemplating my response. It might be good, but it might also ruin the relationship. I intended to keep it digital. Still, the idea of meeting Mystic, who was super hot in the virtual world in real life, intrigued me. It could be a dream come true, and maybe I'd lose my virginity in real life. Being 27 and still a virgin was hard. It wasn't that I was ugly or anything, but I never clicked with guys. Half of them never wanted to take things slow, which was what I wanted. Not to mention, I had the worst schedule known to man, all thanks to my asshole boss, of course. My eyes went back to the screen. It's worth a shot, I messaged him back, mentioning I was worried about meeting up anywhere privately. Mystic responded back, pats your shoulder. I understand. We can meet at a coffee shop. How does that sound? You're in Bethlehem Heights, right? I told him yes, and a coffee shop sounded good. It was a little tacky since that was where most of my flopped dates started, but it was better than a park or something. Good, then how does Saturday sound? Unless you're working. I chuckled. No, I wasn't. For once, Grant, my asshole boss, didn't have some last-minute project. I told him I was free, and we set the time and date. Saturday at 2 p.m. After a little more flirting, I logged off, sitting back with a sigh. Meeting Mystic could change everything. I hoped for the better. The next day. Where is he? I tapped my fingers on the coffee table, wondering if my roleplay partner was about to flake out. God, I hoped not. I was actually excited. Gritting my teeth, I contemplated what to do next. The door opened, and a man appeared. Not just any man, however. My asshole boss, Grant Birkin. This guy was a piece of work. To say I hated him was an understatement. Cold, grayish-brown eyes, long brown hair with silver streaks in it because the guy was like 40 or something. He was attractive. His youthful face made him look younger than he was, but I didn't let the looks fool me. The guy was an asshole who constantly loaded work on me, never gave me any praise, and expected me to be at his beck and call. He looked around, and I clutched the coffee cup. No, this wasn't happening. The footsteps lingered, tapping like the telltale heart in Edgar Allan Poe's book. He walked over to the table and then grabbed his phone. Onyx? The message showed up. I looked up. And the second we made eye contact, I realized what was going on. The guy I'd been crushing on and having the best virtual dates with was none other than the boss who had it out for me and was adamant about making my life miserable. 20 minutes later. Immediately we were at odds. I tried to play it cool. Well, as cool as someone who just realized they were having virtual sex with their boss could. Hey, Grant, Is this some kind of joke? I shook my head. Believe me, I'm just as surprised about it. There is no way you're Onyx. There's no way you're Mystic, I fired back. The server refilled my coffee. Grant got his own. And for the next few minutes, we had a sort of staring contest. Icy glares followed. I'm sorry, but there's no way that I've been speaking with the one employee who makes my life harder. Believe me, you haven't been all that cordial towards me either. He grimaced, and I sat back, smirking. Got anything else? Yes, I'm a fool for even downloading the game. I didn't think that I was. It was an outlet. I just never thought we'd get to this point. I'm sorry, Grant. No, you're not. You led me on, played me for some kind of fool, and made me believe that I want anything to do with you. What makes you think I want anything from you either? I shot. Because you agreed to this. You proposed it! By this point, we had an audience. One that kept watching us like hawks. Sighing, I sat back down. I'm sorry. I just don't know how to feel. This is all new for me. Of course it is, Nathan. You're a pathetic virgin who thinks they can manipulate their boss like that. In fact, we're done here. I tried to respond, but I had nothing. Zilch, nada. The guy I thought was the one turned out to be anything but. Grant got up, slammed his coffee on the table, and then scoffed. You're pathetic, Nathan. And so are you. I did the same, storming out before he uttered another word. After I closed the door, I caught my breath. Why did it have to be him? Out of all the damn people! I kicked the ground, groaning with frustration at the sheer insanity of it all. And the realization that I should have never agreed to meet an online person IRL. A week later, I managed to avoid Grant until a problem at work arose. One of the accounts wouldn't open. I tried everything, realizing that there was no way to open it. Frustrated, I weighed my options, trying to figure out how to approach this without talking to my asshole boss. With no solution in sight, I went to his office and knocked on the door. "Yes," Grant said. "Hey, I don't want to do this, but I guess I have to. I'm trying to open this account." He stared at me, unfazed by my actions. Sighing, I rubbed my temples. "I get it, you don't want to talk to me and... No, let me help. It's the least I can do." We went to my office. Grant sat down, and with skillful hands started to fix the problem until he hit the same firewall that I did. "This is a problem." "Yes, I don't know what to do." "Same problem as me." "Well, you should have said something." "I did, and... Wait, what's the encrypted password here?" he asked, gesturing towards it. I paused. "Oh, he found something." Sighing, I explained. Grant nodded. "Thank you. I'm glad you remembered." "Thanks. I feel like an idiot asking for help." Grant stood up. Our eyes met for the first time in who knows how long. He looked at the current financials and then at the other reports. "You've done a good job so far." "Thanks. That means a lot coming from you." "I know. I realized I should give you more credit." Before I could respond, Grant turned and walked away. The conflict was resolved, but I didn't feel much better. In fact, I felt even more confused. I hated Grant. His words were different from his actions, and I didn't know how to feel. Worst of all, I didn't know the answer to one question: how he felt about me after the previous revelation. The next day, "You're sure there's nobody else?" The last thing I wanted was to spend more time with Grant. However, he shook his head. "You're the best we've got. This event will be good for us." "Yeah, good for us to practically bite each other's heads off." But I did notice after we worked together that Grant seemed almost a little less icy. Maybe I had him all wrong. "No way, he's still my boss and I doubt he has a heart." "Fine," I muttered. That evening, we went to an event together. It was a conference. Grant spoke with others and I met with them too. I felt his gaze on me, and I flushed slightly. What the heck? I was embarrassed? Was it because when he talked I was reminded of Mystic every chance I got? After mingling, we sat outside. Sighing, I turned to him. "I swear you make everything complicated." "How?" "Because whenever I'm around you, I try to hate you, and I thought you hated me." "I never said that I did. You built that narrative." "So what do you think of me then? Now that we have this awkward revelation about each other?" Grant sat there. He didn't respond. "Whatever you want to believe." "What does that mean?" Grant stood up. "Perhaps you've had the wrong narrative all this time. I might be a hard ass, but I never hated you." He walked past me. I caught a whiff of his musky cologne, feeling heady for a second. Am I going insane? There's no way that Grant would... Oh my god. Sighing, I stood up and went back in to get a drink. My feelings for Grant were all over the place, and his statement only made it more complex. 2 days later, Grant and I ended up together again. This time, it was a meeting to discuss the future of the company with investors. I led the meeting, and Grant watched me, nodding with approval. There was something else in those eyes. I was sure of it. Or maybe I assumed such. If I was assuming this, why did I feel as if all I could think about was him? My thoughts turned to him when I was alone. About the times we shared together, and how all that now morphed into, well, my boss. After we finished, Grant stood up. "You know, Nathan, if you keep glaring at me, I'm going to say something." "But I'm not." He chuckled, leaning in. He got so close, and for a moment, I forgot how to speak. "This was not company protocol." "You're a bad liar, Nathan. And I think you've got to figure out those feelings before they come back to bite you." Taken aback, I watched as Grant left. My eyes followed his body as he left the door. Oh my gosh. I was going insane. Frustrated, I groaned, storming out of the office and sequestering myself into my own cubicle for the rest of the day. Grant was making things so much more complicated than they needed to be. And now, I didn't know how I felt about him. In fact, the hatred I felt for him began melting away. 3 days later, I played with other guys in Second Life. However, it felt hollow. All of the guys bored me. Most of them barely uttered a few words before they were all over me, trying to kiss me in the virtual world. It didn't feel right. With Mystic, even if it was Grant, we had a connection. Was it because I worked for him? I didn't know for sure. I kept my head down at the office. Grant gave me looks but nothing else. That's good. As long as I can forget you, I'll be happy. Forgetting was the hard part. Maybe it was the obsession or the addictiveness of the relationship, but I couldn't forget him. In fact, I wanted Grant, despite all of this. What the hell was wrong with me? I sat at the square in the virtual world, eating some ice cream. One guy, someone named Big Papa 23, wanted to meet up, but it seemed to be a flake. Whatever. Footsteps approached, and when I looked up, it was Mystic. Our gaze met and he beckoned to me. Did I want to go with him? Hell no. In fact, I thought about blocking him but didn't have the heart to. What do you want? To talk, Mystic said. I've been trying to forget too. So it was hard for him too. Sighing, I stood up and we went to one of the seats. Mystic sat down and I admired his avatar. Blondish brown hair, striking blue eyes, and a lithe, almost feminine frame. He was so attractive and he almost had a few nods to Grant. If Grant was younger, of course. I'm sorry. I never thought that this would happen. Me neither. Mystic was quiet for a few seconds, before continuing. I'm sorry. I overreacted in the coffee shop. I just couldn't believe it. The same guy that I had a connection with turned out to be the one employee that drove me crazy. The feeling's mutual, I scoffed. Mystic sighed. I'm willing to give this a chance. I know I don't deserve it, but maybe we can work something out. If we can't, then I'll give this up, and we can block each other and go our separate ways. It did seem like a good idea. Putting this to bed and getting closure seemed perfect. With a nod, I smiled. All right, you have a deal. 1 date. If there's nothing, then we can just pretend we don't exist. Got it. We agreed to meet 2 days from now. Although our relationship was shaky, I was just happy that we at least had some civility. Maybe that civility would translate to something more. 2 days later, Grant showed up right at 7 p.m. We met outside, sitting in the corner so as not to disturb patrons. I held the espresso and he got a latte. This place makes the best lattes. It does. I like their selection. Indeed. So, Nathan, where do we begin? I had no clue. This felt like a blind date, but not a blind date. I knew who he was, but that didn't mean I felt we had any inkling of a connection. Hell if I know. I guess tell me what you would have been doing if you weren't sitting here talking to the worst employee of the month you've had. Grant rolled his eyes. Well, you're not that bad. So what you're saying is that you just like to give me crap then? No, that's not it at all, he snapped. What I'm trying to say is, you haven't utterly pissed me off in the 5 minutes we've been here. Shocking. But yeah, I guess we can start with why we even signed up for Second Life. It seemed like a good innocuous place to start. I joined because I'm a lonely guy with a hellish schedule who doesn't get a break. You? Grant's face tightened, and he frowned. I joined because after my ex-boyfriend and I had a fight, I felt like nothing else gave me the connection that I wanted. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. I was a workaholic, and the guy preferred sitting on his ass and painting pictures. Hey, painting pictures is fun, I retorted. It is for some. For me, however, I prefer the outside world. Wait, you too? Hold on. Did Grant and I just agree on something? I sat there, completely enamored for a moment before I gathered myself. Grant's face softened, and the semblance of a smile followed. I do. I like traveling. Wow. Great minds think alike, then. That they do. We talked about the outside and other little subjects. I was shocked to find that Grant and I talked for 2 hours. He could barely tell me good job at the office. What changed? At the end of the night, we parted ways but agreed to date next week. As Grant left, I rested my hand on my heart. It beat rapidly, hammering through my chest. Did I like Grant? A week later, Grant took us to a mountain biking trail. It was an intermediate course, but it was fun. Grant showed me techniques I'd never seen anyone use. The entire time I was focused on him. He was in good shape and took damn good care of himself. To say that I was a dumb little lover boy was an understatement. When did this obsession with Grant overtake my thoughts? At the end of the day, we biked to the top of a mountain and looked down at the world below. That's when Grant's face softened, showing an inkling of vulnerability. "I'm glad you agreed to a date," he said. "Me too, Grant. I never would have thought that you'd want something like this." "Me neither. I never used to date. I thought I was terrible at it." "What about the ex?" "Perfect example. Andrew was the first guy in ages I dated. Before all of that, it was hookups." I turned, staring at him with slight surprise. "Wow. I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. Part of it is because I don't really connect with others." "Why is that?" "Because it's hard. I'm always angry and frustrated. Even showing a hint of emotion is not something I do. Talking about this now is a challenge." I nodded, understanding him a bit better. "It makes sense." Grant sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I worked so hard, built this business from the ground up. I focused so much on that I lost sight of myself." I understood the frustration perfectly. Grant was a workaholic, a man who refused to take a breath and settle down. I reached out and touched his hand. "I get it. I also suck at dating. Frankly, I gave up until I met you." He chuckled. "So you're saying you want to date?" "I mean, sure, just try to be a little more open with me." Grant chuckled. "I will certainly try." Our bodies inched closer and he gave me a long, drawn-out kiss. My heart raced. It felt so perfect. For a moment, I just kissed him back. We were more alike than I thought. Tonight, we got even closer, and I started to realize that this might be the guy I'd been waiting for. A week later, Grant and I went to another mountain bike trail, but this time, there were waterfalls. I sighed as I looked at the large cascade of water. Wow. Beautiful, isn't it? It's even better with you. Grant hesitantly reached for my waist, and I let him caress it. Sighing, I nodded. "It feels nice, being close like this." "That it does," he murmured. "This is the first time I've done anything on this level of intimacy with someone in a long time." "Same. Half the time I've wondered if I've been doing things wrong." "You're not." "Thank God," I sighed. "The only experience I have is with the MMO and, well, having a couple of awkward dates with some guys in college." "You didn't have a boyfriend?" I shook my head. "I only figured out I was gay in the last 5 years. In college I tried with girls, but we never clicked. That and with trying to get my degree in finance, I was so busy." "Makes sense. Also explains why you were hired for a higher position in financial management than others with your experience." I grinned. "Told you I worked hard." "You do. And I'm sorry if I've made things hard on you. I never realized how harmful my actions can be." I shook my head. "Don't be upset. It happens. I'm just glad I get to see this side of you. The MMO prepared me for this, but not the feeling of touch." He chuckled. "It didn't prepare you for this either, then." Spinning me around, Grant placed a hot, open-mouthed kiss on my lips. I kissed him back, gasping slightly with need. It was perfect, the kind of kiss that feels surreal. Our hands and bodies touched, and as we pulled away, he lowered his voice to a sultry murmur. "Want to go back?" I nodded, understanding the implications. We headed back to his place, a flashy penthouse, and that night, something magical happened. Grant took my virginity. The next day, after we ordered, we walked back to his apartment. When he stopped, Andrew. A stranger walked over before I uttered a word, looking us up and down. "Grant, good to see you. Surprised you're with someone, considering how much of a workaholic you were when we were together." "We're not," I started, but was cut off in mid-sentence. "Why are you here, Andrew? I told you to never speak to me again, let alone acknowledge me." Andrew smirked. "Because I want to say you should be careful. Who knows what might be lurking in the shadows." With a small smile, he disappeared. I looked at Grant, whose hands shook with anger. "Grant, are you—" "I'm fine. I told him I never wanted to see him again. I have my reasons for this." Without another word, Grant stormed away, leaving me alone. A week later, I worked on the company financials, but I noticed something was off. It was my recent paycheck. Something about the numbers looked skewed. I approached Grant, confronting him on this. He cocked his brow. "There's nothing wrong here. But you're in charge of the finances, Nathan. Maybe you should double-check your own handiwork." He turned and walked away. I sighed, frustrated. "You know, I know that you're still mad about what happened with Andrew, but you don't have to take it out on me." Grant turned, and for a moment I saw vulnerability flash before his eyes. "I'm not." He left, and I was alone again, confused about the money and where it went. Something happened, right? I had a bad feeling about this. 2 weeks later, Grant kept his distance, but that was the least of my worries. There was money missing. I scoured and looked around, confused. I asked Grant to tell me where this money was. The money was taken out of paychecks, specifically mine. Curious, I clicked around, but nothing showed up. That's when I got an email from someone. A lawsuit involving embezzlement of checks. Reading the contents, my hands shook. Grant's been embezzling the company's money? What the heck? I made a couple more notes before I put it to the side. The best thing to do was ignore it. However, from what I learned, ignoring was not that possible. Especially when the hard truth was right there. The next day, I had to confront Grant. First thing that morning, I stormed into the office, angry about what had happened. Grant claimed he worked hard and built all of this, the whole 9 yards, only for him to pull the rug from underneath and take my hard-earned money. I was trying to pay off debts. I took all those extra hours. And for what? To get tossed to the side like that? Anger didn't begin to cover how I felt. I opened the door, and Grant looked at me with confusion. "Nathan, what? Care to explain this?" I slammed the papers down and glared at him. Grant read this over. "This has to be a mistake. The money is missing. I've been getting paid less. I tried to look for the money and lost it. Can you explain any of this?" "I can't, but I'll figure this out." "No, I don't have time to wait," I snapped, feeling the fires of anger only grow stronger. "Nathan, please." "I'm done. I am not helping the company whose owner lies. I trusted you, Grant. I thought you cared. It's nice to know that this was all for nothing." Grant stood up. "I would never do such a thing. Perhaps Andrew—" "Oh, let it go, Grant. I'm tired of your excuses." I turned, leaving the office before I heard any more excuses from Grant. A month later. A month changes a person. Except in my case, in some instances, I remained the same. I got a new job as a bank teller. Occasionally, I helped people apply for loans. The entire time, I thought about Grant. I wondered about him. Logging in became an addiction for me. Sometimes I'd check almost 10 times a day to look for him. But there was nothing. He never showed up and never bothered to tell me anything. Instead, it was empty. Just my luck. The obsession got bad, to the point where I was thinking about him at work. I went to therapy and tried to forget him. It managed the symptoms, but it did little to help the overall feelings I shared. I missed him. I utterly, completely missed him. One morning as I got my coffee from the coffee shop, I spotted a newspaper nearby. Normally I didn't care about tabloids, but Grant's face was on there. CEO of major company stomps out lawsuit orchestrated by ex-boyfriend. Wait, what? I grabbed the paper and read the contents. The scandal and the embezzlement was all a lie crafted by Andrew. He stole the money and painted a picture that Grant was responsible for everything. Seeing this made my hands tremble. Grant was innocent, and I didn't trust him. I regretted it. I grabbed my phone and dialed Grant. However, before I made the call, I stopped myself. No, he's going to hate me for everything, for what I've done. I doubt he'll forgive me. He hasn't even logged into the game. I missed my opportunity, and now I needed to pay the price. 2 weeks later, I logged into Second Life and talked with a few people. One of them was a mutual contact who I flirted with but never did anything more. We talked and he offered me a chance to go party at some club. I said sure, why not? It was free after all. I put on a nice black shirt and pants and headed to the club. When I got in there, my character danced with others, but I found myself scouring the crowd. What was I doing? It wasn't like he'd be here. Onyx? I turned, seeing Grant, or Mystic, right there. He wore a loose black shirt and some hip-hugging jeans. He looked attractive, but a frown sat on his face. Mystic? I gasped. What are you— Can we talk? I didn't have an answer for that. I wanted to say yes, to tell him that everything was fine. But was he willing to forgive me? I hurt you, though. I know. You did. But I haven't stopped thinking about you. The revelation made my heart race. You didn't stop thinking about me either. With a sigh, I nodded. Okay, Let's talk, but not here. Outside of the game. Where? Mystic smiled. I'll come to your place. My heart raced. Grant would come here. We would talk and then... With a smile, I spoke. Sure, come on over. I'll be waiting for you. A half hour later. Grant showed up a half hour later. I barely had any time to clean the damn place. We sat down and for a moment, the tension was awkward. So... I'm sorry, Grant, I spat out. I'm sorry I didn't know about what happened. It's fine, Nathan. I just didn't realize all of the mess behind this. How, because of what Andrew did, we almost lost everything. Grant hummed. I know, Nathan, but we don't have to worry about that anymore. Because I'm selling the company. I sat there, taking this in. What? Why? You don't have to do that. No, I do, Nathan. I want to live a normal and quiet life. Andrew almost ruined my image. What then? Will he come back? I sued him to oblivion, but I have the chance to retire. Grant grabbed my hands and held them tightly. I missed the closeness, the connection we shared. Nathan, this is the first time I felt alive. I want you to make a choice, which is to stay with me or to break things off. Was Grant some kind of idiot? I smiled, shaking my head. You're a fool, Grant. I want to stay with you. I want to be with you. I'm sorry for not believing you. It's fine. I know it's hard being with someone who has this much power. Andrew was a part of my past, but I promise that I'll treat you better. I leaned forward, enjoying the soft, subtle touch of Grant's hand. You promise? He closed the gap, lips barely ghosting mine. I promise. Because this love means more to me than anything. We kissed, and my heart warmed with delight. That was what I wanted. The man that I needed, and the one I cherished. Grant meant the world to me. We came together under unlikely circumstances, but what followed in its wake was something unlike anything I'd experienced before. Conclusion. Grant and I both quit the MMO at the same time. He ended up selling the company to a business partner, and I got a job as their head of finance. We moved in together, and things were great. A year later, while on a mountain biking trip in Colorado, we stopped. Grant pulled me to the side and asked me to marry him. Of course I said yes. This was not the MMO boyfriend I expected, but I can't complain. I'm happy and glad I found love. The end. Have you ever formed a deep connection with someone you met in an online game? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome!